Did you know the 1970s didn't just give us disco and bell-bottoms, but also the most banned films in cinema history? Films so shocking that projectionists refused to load them and countries destroyed prints. But now, these forbidden visions are streaming right into your living room. Ready to see what they tried to hide from your parents? The Last House on the Left, 1972. Wes Craven's directorial debut wasn't just banned, it was treated like a societal threat. This brutal revenge story about two girls who encounter escaped convicts carries the infamous tagline, "To avoid fainting, keep repeating, it's only a movie." For good reason. The raw, documentary-like violence had censors reaching for their scissors faster than audiences could reach for the exit doors. The controversy wasn't just about what Craven showed, but how he showed it. No Hollywood polish, no comfortable distance, just unflinching horror shot on grainy 16mm that felt disturbingly real. Countries including the UK, Australia, and Canada outright banned it, while American theaters received heavily edited prints missing up to 30 minutes of footage. Critics were divided into camps, those who called it sadistic trash, and those who recognized its unflinching commentary on Vietnam-era violence coming home to America's backyard. Roger Ebert famously declared he couldn't recommend it, but couldn't dismiss it either. What many censors missed was the film's moral complexity. Craven wasn't glorifying violence. He was holding up a mirror to a society already saturated with it. When producers wanted to cut the jarring tonal shifts between horror and comedy, Craven fought back, arguing these uncomfortable contrasts were the whole point. Now, available uncut on Tubi, the restored version reveals Craven's complete vision. A film that didn't just frighten viewers, but forced them to confront uncomfortable truths about humanity's capacity for violence. What was once forbidden is now recognized as the birth of a new era in horror filmmaking. Straw Dogs, 1971. Sam Peckinpah didn't just push buttons with straw dogs, he smashed them with a sledgehammer. This psychological thriller follows a mild-mannered mathematician who relocates to rural England with his young wife, only to face escalating harassment that erupts into brutal violence. But it wasn't the violence alone that terrified censors. It was the suggestion that civilization is just a thin veneer over our primitive instincts. The film's controversial assault scene caused immediate censorship battles. British censors demanded cuts, American distributors grew nervous, and multiple countries banned it outright. Sweden refused to certify it until 1999, nearly 3 decades after release. What made it particularly divisive was the ambiguous portrayal of the victims' reactions, with Peckinpah deliberately blurring the line between resistance and participation. Behind the scenes, Peckinpah battled studio executives who demanded a softer film. His response? "I'm trying to tell a story about violence and change, not make a midnight movie." Critics were sharply divided. Pauline Kael called it a fascist classic, while others praised its unflinching examination of human nature. The controversy followed Dustin Hoffman, who spent years defending his participation in the project. What censors couldn't bear was the film's central message, that violence isn't foreign to us, but dormant within each person. Peckinpah wasn't celebrating this darkness. He was warning about it. The Siege finale, restored to its full intensity on streaming platforms, shows exactly why it became such a lightning rod. Today on Prime, you can watch the complete uncut version, revealing Peckinpah's masterful build of tension through increasingly disturbing encounters that culminate in a home invasion sequence that still shocks viewers half a century later. The Exorcist, 1973. When The Exorcist first rotated heads in 1973, it didn't just shock audiences, it literally sent them running for the exits. William Friedkin's tale of demonic possession became the first horror film nominated for Best Picture, but not before causing fainting spells, vomiting, and heart attacks in theaters nationwide. Some cities deployed ambulances outside screenings. Medical emergencies were documented across America. What made censors panic wasn't just the supernatural horror, but the clinical, almost documentary-like approach Friedkin took to filming the possession. The infamous crucifix scene was cut in multiple countries, and the United Kingdom banned it from home video until the late 1990s. In Italy and Spain, religious organizations protested theaters showing it, calling it blasphemy disguised as entertainment. The production itself became legendary for its troubled shoot. Ellen Burstyn suffered a permanent spinal injury during filming, and the set mysteriously caught fire, destroying everything except the bedroom where the exorcism scenes were filmed. When a priest was brought in to bless the production, he warned the cast and crew, "There is evil in that film." His words became part of the marketing. Critics were split between those hailing it as a masterpiece and others condemning it as, the Vatican established a special committee to determine if the film was anti-Catholic. They eventually decided it wasn't. What censors couldn't cut was the psychological impact. The film tapped into primal fears that transcended religious beliefs. Streaming uncut on Prime today, the complete version includes the infamous spider walk scene, originally cut for being too disturbing, finally revealing Friedkin's complete vision of a film that didn't just scare audiences, it made them question their beliefs about good and evil. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 1974. Tobe Hooper's low-budget Nightmare Factory revolutionized horror while becoming one of the most banned films in history. Following a group of friends who encounter a family of cannibals in rural Texas, it was marketed as being based on true events, a clever lie that amplified its impact. But here's the shocker. Despite its reputation for extreme gore, most of the violence happens off-screen, proving censors reacted more to the film's raw intensity than actual content. The film was rejected outright in the UK, Australia, Brazil, and Singapore, with some bans lasting decades. In America, theaters in conservative states refused to screen it, while others created their own unauthorized edits. The MPAA originally slapped it with an X rating before grudgingly giving it an R after cuts. Even the film's title became controversial, with some newspapers refusing to print the word chainsaw. The production was famously hellish. The cast endured 16-hour days in 100-plus degree Texas heat, surrounded by real animal carcasses and rotting food. The stench on set was so bad that crew members vomited regularly. Actress Marilyn Burns suffered actual injuries during filming when fake effects didn't look realistic enough for Hooper's vision. Critics were deeply divided. Some dismissed it as exploitative trash, while others recognized its artistry. Rex Reed called it the most horrifying film ever made, inadvertently giving the movie its best marketing quote. What censors missed was the film's biting social commentary on post-Vietnam America and the collapse of rural economies. Now, streaming in its complete form on Tubi, viewers can finally experience the uncut version, complete with the surreal family dinner scene that many censors found too disturbing to allow. What once caused international outrage is now recognized as one of the most influential horror films ever made. A Clockwork Orange, 1971. Stanley Kubrick didn't just challenge censors with A Clockwork Orange. He created a film so controversial, he himself pulled it from British circulation for nearly 30 years. This dystopian nightmare follows Alex, a charismatic delinquent whose ultraviolence leads to experimental rehabilitation that raises disturbing questions about free will and state control. The film's stylized brutality, set to classical music, created a viewing experience that was both repulsive and mesmerizing. When released, it faced X ratings, heavy cuts, and outright bans in countries including Ireland, Singapore, and South Africa. What made it particularly controversial was how Kubrick made the audience complicit by presenting violence through Alex's charming narration. Most shocking was Kubrick's own censorship. After receiving death threats and learning of crimes allegedly inspired by the film, he requested Warner Brothers stop showing it in the UK, a ban that lasted until his death in 1999. Malcolm McDowell, who played Alex, later said the filming took a physical and psychological toll, he claimed, noting that the infamous eye-opening scene caused actual corneal scratches. The notorious assault scenes required weeks of choreography to achieve Kubrick's vision of balletic violence. Critics were sharply divided between those hailing it as a masterpiece and others condemning it as morally bankrupt. The New York Times called it a brilliant and dangerous work, while conservative critics labeled it intellectual pornography. What many censors missed was the film's scathing political satire. It wasn't promoting violence, but exposing societal hypocrisy about it. Streaming uncut on Tubi today, viewers can finally experience Kubrick's complete vision, including scenes cut from most theatrical releases. The restoration reveals a film that doesn't simply shock, it forces uncomfortable questions about morality, free will, and the nature of evil itself. The Devils, 1971. Ken Russell's religious psychodrama wasn't just controversial, it was treated like a cinematic crime. This historical drama about a 17th century priest accused of witchcraft and demonic possession features imagery so provocative that the original cut has never been fully released. Warner Brothers demanded so many cuts before its premiere that Russell reportedly wept when he saw the edited version. The studio then locked away the excised footage, creating one of cinema's most legendary lost cuts. The film faced outright bans in Italy and Chile, while British censors demanded substantial cuts. In America, it received an X rating even after heavy editing. Most controversial was the Rape of Christ sequence, showing nuns in a sexual frenzy with a statue of Jesus. A scene so inflammatory that Warner Brothers kept it locked in their vaults for decades. Religious organizations worldwide condemned the film, with the Catholic Church calling it blasphemy masquerading as art. The making of the film was equally chaotic. Star Oliver Reed claimed the atmosphere on set was like filming in an asylum. Vanessa Redgrave threw herself so completely into her role as a hunchbacked, sexually obsessed nun that crew members reported being genuinely disturbed by her performance between takes. Critics were wildly divided. Some hailed it as Russell's masterpiece, while others dismissed it as exploitative shock value. What many missed was the film's serious examination of how religion and politics intersect, with Russell commenting, "I wasn't attacking the church, I was attacking the corruption of institutions." The version streaming today on Tubi is the most complete publicly available, though still missing some of the most controversial scenes. Film historians continue searching for the complete original cut, making this one of the few 70s films that remains partially censored even in the streaming era. A testament to how deeply it disturbed the establishment. I Spit on Your Grave, 1978. Mayor Zarchi's revenge thriller wasn't just controversial. It created a cultural earthquake that's still reverberating today. Originally titled Day of the Woman, this unflinching film follows a writer who systematically hunts down and kills the 4 men who attacked her. What made censors panic wasn't just the graphic violence, but the film's refusal to look away during the 30-minute assault sequence and its presentation of revenge as justified rather than tragic. The film was banned in countries including Germany, Australia, and China, while the UK placed it on their infamous Video Nasties list, making possession of the tape a potential criminal offense. In America, Roger Ebert famously gave it 0 stars, calling it a vile bag of garbage, while feminist critics were divided between those condemning it as exploitation and others defending it as a raw examination of trauma and empowerment. What many censors missed was Zarchi's inspiration. He based the film on his experience helping a real assault victim who was then mistreated by police. "I wanted to show the horror of assault without glamorizing it," he later explained, "and to show a woman taking power back without male saviors." The controversy only deepened when star Camille Keaton, Buster Keaton's granddaughter, married Zarchi shortly after filming. The production itself was remarkably low budget, shot guerrilla style in Connecticut, with a skeleton crew. Keaton performed many dangerous stunts herself, including extended scenes in freezing water. When theaters refused to screen it, Zarchi rented venues himself and promoted the film independently, turning censorship into a marketing advantage. Now available uncut on Prime, viewers can finally see the complete version, including scenes that were trimmed even in its original release. The restoration reveals a film far more complex than its exploitation reputation suggests. A brutal examination of violence, justice, and the failure of institutions to protect victims. Suspiria, 1977. Dario Argento didn't just make a horror film with Suspiria. He created a hallucinatory nightmare so visually shocking that censors worldwide reach for their scissors. This Technicolor fever dream about a dance academy run by a coven of witches opens with one of cinema's most brutal murder sequences. A 12-minute symphony of stabbings, hangings, and a still-shocking impalement through stained glass. Censors weren't prepared for horror that looked like a blood-soaked fairy tale. The German censors were particularly disturbed, cutting nearly 7 minutes from the film. Japan, Britain, and Australia demanded significant edits before release. In America, theaters received different versions depending on regional sensitivities. What truly unnerved authorities wasn't just the violence, but how Argento presented it, as hauntingly beautiful, with vibrant colors and the iconic Goblin soundtrack transforming murder into macabre art. The production itself was legendarily challenging. Argento demanded that the film be shot in expiring 3-strip Technicolor to achieve its unnatural color palette. The cast worked in uncomfortable conditions, with Jessica Harper later revealing she performed most scenes in freezing temperatures. For the famous room filled with barbed wire sequence, Argento used real wire that could have seriously injured the actress. Critics were deeply divided. Some dismissed it as meaningless splatter, while others recognized its groundbreaking visual style. Roger Ebert praised its voluptuous quality despite the violence. What censors fundamentally misunderstood was that Suspiria wasn't about narrative logic. It was about creating a sensory experience that felt like being trapped in someone else's nightmare. Streaming in its complete uncut form on Tubi today, viewers can finally experience Argento's full vision. A horror film that influenced everything from music videos to fashion design. What was once deemed too extreme for audiences is now recognized as one of cinema's most uniquely artistic approaches to fear. Last Tango in Paris, 1972. Bernardo Bertolucci's controversial drama about an anonymous affair didn't just push boundaries, it shattered them with a sledgehammer, following a middle-aged American widower, Marlon Brando, who enters into a physically intense relationship with a young Parisian woman, Maria Schneider. The film caused international outrage upon release. Italy's highest court ordered all copies destroyed. Chile and Portugal banned it outright, and Bertolucci was even sentenced to 4 months in prison, suspended, for creating an obscene work. What truly set this film apart was Brando's raw, improvisational performance. But the controversy reached new heights decades later, when Schneider revealed she wasn't informed about certain intimate scenes before filming, feeling humiliated and a little raped. This admission transformed how the film is viewed today, raising serious ethical questions about directorial conduct and performer consent that transcend the original censorship debates. The production was notoriously chaotic, with Brando and Bertolucci rewriting dialogue daily and pushing boundaries without studio interference. When United Artists executives finally saw the result, they reportedly sat in stunned silence before one said, "We have a movie that nobody's going to see." Instead, it became a sensation, with long lines at theaters and heated public debates about art versus exploitation. Critics were sharply divided, with Pauline Kael famously calling it the most powerfully erotic movie ever made, while others condemned it as pretentious pornography. The film's uncompromising exploration of grief, power dynamics, and emotional isolation challenged audiences accustomed to seeing romance presented through a sanitized Hollywood lens. Available in its complete form on Prime, today's viewers can experience the uncut film that changed how cinema addressed adult relationships. However, modern audiences view it through a different lens, recognizing both its artistic significance and the troubling circumstances of its creation, a complexity that goes beyond the original censorship controversies. The Wicker Man, 1973. Robin Hardy's folk horror masterpiece didn't just get censored, it got literally buried. After a disastrous initial reception, studio executives allegedly used the original negative as landfill in a highway construction project. Following a police sergeant investigating a missing girl on a remote Scottish island, the film builds to one of cinema's most shocking endings. A revelation so disturbing that distributors demanded savage cuts before release. The British Lion studio executives were so baffled by the film that they slashed it from 102 minutes to 87, destroying the careful pacing that made its finale so effective. American distributors cut it even further to 84 minutes. For decades, the original version was thought completely lost until pieces began emerging from private collections and film archives worldwide. The troubled production became legendary. Christopher Lee, who considered it his finest performance, was so passionate about the project that he worked for free when money ran out. The famous ending was filmed in freezing conditions, with the massive wicker structure genuinely concerning local fire authorities. When the studio butchered the final cut, Hardy and Lee were devastated, spending years trying to recover the complete version. Critics initially dismissed it, but The Wicker Man found its audience through late-night TV showings and underground screenings. It gradually built a cult following that recognized its brilliance long before mainstream critics caught up. Pink Flamingos, 1972. John Waters didn't just create a film with pink flamingos, he launched a celluloid hand grenade that's still exploding 50 years later. This micro-budget shocker about the filthiest person alive features imagery so transgressive that even describing it violates content guidelines. When it premiered at the Baltimore Film Festival, audiences either walked out disgusted or stayed to witness something they'd never seen before: cinema with absolutely no boundaries. The film was outright banned in Australia, Norway, Canada, and numerous other countries. In America, it was relegated to midnight screenings at countercultural theaters. When it finally received home video release decades later, some rental chains refused to stock it. The film's finale, involving an act so notorious it can't be described here, remains one of cinema's most infamous moments, with Waters proudly noting, "No one ever walked out during the last scene. They were too shocked." The guerrilla production defined DIY filmmaking. Waters shot without permits, had real-life drag queen Divine shoplifting on camera, and created shocking effects with the cheapest possible materials. The cast, mostly Waters' friends known as the Dreamlanders, performed while actually intoxicated for many scenes. Divine later said, "Even I was shocked by some of the things John asked me to do." Critics initially couldn't even process it. The few reviews called it repulsive, disgusting, and unwatchable. Mainstream critics wouldn't touch it for years. Sallow, or The 120 Days of Sodom, 1975, Paolo Pasolini's final film before his murder, wasn't just controversial, it remains possibly the most universally banned film ever made. Adapting the Marquis de Sade's notorious novel but setting it in fascist Italy, Pasolini created a deliberately unwatchable examination of power, corruption. The film depicts 4 wealthy fascists who kidnap 18 teenagers and subject them to months of increasingly horrific torture. Even today, it's banned in several countries and heavily censored in others. The controversy wasn't just about the graphic content. It was Pasolini's uncompromising metaphor, linking fascism to degradation. The film faced bans in Australia, Finland, Germany, Norway, and numerous other countries. In Italy, all copies were seized, and Pasolini himself was charged with obscenity. In the UK, it was banned until 2000. Even when finally released, many theaters refused to screen it. The production itself was extraordinarily difficult for everyone involved. Pasolini insisted on clinical detachment in filming the most disturbing scenes, creating an atmosphere of genuine discomfort on set.